Hey everybody, JB here, and welcome to something new that I'm going to be starting here over the next few weeks. I've decided to kind of follow in the footsteps of a few YouTube content creators that I follow and go through my board game shelves. I've kind of been keeping up with a few of the people that I follow online, and a lot of them have been spending quarantine time going through and kind of reviewing some of the things that they own on their board game shelves, and I thought it'd be kind of fun to do the same thing. I've got 16 cubes on this shelving setup that I've got here at home, and I'm going to be spending a video going through each of the cubes and just kind of talking about why I have some of these games and why I enjoy them so much. One of my favorite things to do is to evangelize this hobby that I really enjoy a lot and in different ways, and I thought this would be kind of a fun way to do it. There's different shelves, and to be honest, I think this first one is probably going to be the longest to go through just because there's so many things on it. It's kind of become the party game shelf, as it were. But a lot of the other ones only have a few things on them. So I hope you enjoy this. I hope this is fun to watch. And without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing we got here is Taboo. Now, Taboo, of course, is a classic. It's one of the games from the 80s that I still own. And it's a classic for a reason, I think. It's one of those games that just has a really fun hook to it, where the whole concept is that somebody is trying to get people to guess words, but they can't say certain words. So, for example, in this thing here on the back of the box, we have snore, and you can't say sleep, no, sound, night, or noise on it. So if you can give clues without saying those words, you're good. But if you say one of the words, then the person next to you is going to use this device to let you know that you done goofed. And unfortunately, this version of the game does not have the electronic buzzer that you press and it goes this one is a squeaker. It actually is called the squeaker, and it makes a squeaky noise, which it's fine, I guess. But unfortunately, it's not the buzzer, but it works. You know, it's still a really fun game. A lot of people have tried to replicate this game's success, but I don't think anybody's really succeeded yet. And I've tried to find other games that kind of come close to this, but this is still, in my opinion, the classic one. So that's Taboo. All right, the next game here is probably the only one on this shelf that's technically not really a party game. It's a game called Patchwork, and it's designed by pretty prolific designer Uwe Rosenberg, who does a lot of really complex Euro-style games. But this one is not that. This is a game for two players, as you can see down here at the bottom. And it has a really interesting concept, and this is probably going to be a recurring theme. I have the box covers on the wrong way, especially with these square ones. But I'll show you here on the back. You have this grid that you're putting these polyomino pieces on. They're kind of like Tetris-shaped pieces, but they're not just tetrominoes, like with four sections to them. They're polyominoes, so they can have any number of sections. So like this is a tetromino, but like this one is like a sexomino, and this one is that one might be a tetromino, but this one looks like a pentomino. And so you're building this this quilt out of these pieces, and you're spending buttons to buy the pieces from like a giant circle. But the trick is that there is a board, it's not pictured here, but there's a board that you're going through, and you're advancing on it every time you buy a piece. And the game only lasts as long as you're on that board. So as soon as you run out of time, you're done, which you kind of have to balance out time with the pieces you want. And if you get really cool pieces with these buttons, then you pass certain spaces on the board, and then you can get more buttons. And it just kind of generates this income for you that's really, really cool. So that's Patchwork. I highly recommend this game to couples who are looking for a fun game to play while either on a date or indoors, stuck inside right now. It's just a lot of fun. All right, moving on to Decrypto. Now, this game, this is a really interesting one. It's one of those games that kind of flew under the radar, I think, for a lot of people. And I think mainly just because it got compared to the critical darling Codenames, which came out, I think, a year before this came out. But this game, I think, is, in a lot of ways, a lot more thematically tied to its presentation than Codenames is. And for those who don't know what Codenames is, it's this word game where you're trying to work as a team against another team, in which a team captain is giving clues to people to guess words that are a part of this grid, but not the other team's words. And so you have to get all of yours before the other team gets all of theirs. In this game, you're on a team, but what you're doing is quite different. You have 4 words for the whole game, and they're on this. I'm going to hold it up here so you can see it better. They're on this screen thing. This is a thing that stands up, and you'll see here there's like this red screen. It's kind of like those toys that a lot of us played with back in the 80s and 90s, where you kind of put a card inside of it and you can read stuff. But here you have these 4 words, right? And they are your words for the whole game. Like, they don't change on you. But the player whose turn it is draws this card of numbers, and that's the sequence that they're trying to get their team to guess. So in this case, it's going to be cocktail, sombrero, and dragonfly for 3, 4, and 2. And so they give one-word clues to their teammates to get them to guess what the order is. And the teammates know what the words are. But here's the thing, though. Every team has a sheet on which they record their word bank, and on the reverse side of that, they can record the opposite team's words. So over time, you build this word bank, and the opposite team might be able to intercept what your order is. Like, they don't even know what these words are, but they might be able to figure it out based on the clues you give. And if they synergize well enough with the existing clues that you gave in previous turns, then they could snag points away from you. And it's such a cool concept. I know it sounds kind of a little weird just based on how I described it here. It's more one of those things that you just have to play to kind of get a feel for it, but it's a lot of fun. Personally, I find it way more engaging than Codenames, because in Codenames, you're kind of just having to sit there while the team captain person reads the board, the grid of cards. And then if you're the opposing team, you really don't do much on the active team's turn. But this one, you're always having to pay attention, and I really like that a lot. So that's Decrypto. Really great game from publisher Yellow. They put out a lot of good stuff. All right, I'm going to go to this one next. This is another game that's kind of flown under the radar and has a sort of a different, I guess you could call it an analog that a lot of people compare it to. This one's called Muse, and you'll see this artwork here that just looks really, really gorgeous. And a lot of people, here's another box I need to flip over. But a lot of people would compare this game to the popular 2000, I forgot if it was 8, I want to say it was like 10 or something, but it came out several years ago, the game Dixit, where you have all these cards with these surreal pieces of artwork, and in Dixit you try to get people to guess what your card is based on like a clue you give, and that clue could be anything. But the problem with Dixit is that it's kind of awkward to teach, at least for me. It's a really interesting concept. We're trying to get some people to guess, but not all of them and not none of them. But in this, it's kind of a really strange thing to teach until you play it, kind of like Decrypto. Whereas in this one, I feel like this is a lot more straightforward. You're in teams, the opposing team picks your card for you, but you don't get to see what the other ones are until they give them to you. And so then the person who is the muse, the person giving the clues, has to come up with a clue before the other team gives them the other cards, which is pretty cool. It's a neat idea. And then even on top of that, one of the things I really like about Muse is that they have these cards, which are called the inspiration cards. And these cards, you have 2 per round. And you get to pick one that you use as your clue. And these are like different prompts that you can use as like ways to give a clue. So sometimes it could be name a fictional character, or hum a song, or this one says do an interpretive dance. I mean, you could do a charade to help point to your piece of artwork that you're trying to do. And of course, the other team is picking the card based on what the available inspiration cards are. So you're getting different kind of like pieces of guidance into what you can do. It's not so open-ended that it's overwhelming, and I really like that a lot. This box has both the base game and also this expansion called Awakenings stuffed inside it, so there's a lot of these gorgeous cards inside, and it's a really fun game. Alright, so this game, this is the one I would say on this shelf that I'm kind of on the fence about keeping right now, but it's called But Wait, There's More, and it's essentially another kind of creative party game, but this one is more on the chaotic side of things. This one involves being a bunch of infomercial presenters, and you're trying to essentially present a pitch. And I think you have a partner, I can't remember, but you have these cards, and there I go again with the boxes. You have these cards here that you draw, and you have to like combine these things together. Like this is the product, and then these are like the features of the product, and you have to give like this very quick elevator pitch in 30 seconds to sell this thing. And then you have like this twist where like along the way you have to draw another feature and say, but wait, there's more, and then you add on to it impromptu, like without preparing at all. And then everybody votes on which ones that they really enjoy a lot, and then people get points based on that. It's fine. I think the appeal to it for it is just mainly the fun of just drawing these crazy combinations of stuff. But I tend not to go for games like this by default, just because they kind of tend to hinge on the group really enjoying them. Not everyone is comfortable talking in front of a bunch of people, and so it's for that reason I kind of hesitate to recommend stuff like this to everybody. But with the right groups, this can be a lot of fun. So we'll see how long this stays in. All right, so now on to one of the most classic games in the collection. This is The Resistance, which is I think it came out in like the late 2000s, but it kind of has this very Hunger Games-esque look. In fact, it takes place in a universe called the Dystopian Universe. And it's part of a series of games. I think it's the first one in the series that focuses on this universe. And this one in particular has this social deduction element to it. For those of you who have never played a social deduction game, it's essentially a game with these three things generally. You have secret identities where everyone gets a different role. You have to figure out who everyone is. And most of the time, you're probably going to want to lie through your teeth so you don't get discovered. And this game distills that concept down into something very simple and very approachable. You have two teams. You have the Empire and you have the Resistance. And the Resistance is trying to carry out these secret missions so that they can win the game. It's like best 3 out of 5. And the Empire is trying to sabotage those missions. And so each game... You know what? I'll fix these later. Unfortunately, there isn't actually a picture on the back of the box of what's inside here. But you have this little mat here that has like the 5 missions. And then everybody gets the opportunity to be a part of it, and so someone picks out who they want. So you have certain numbers of people who have to be a part of every mission, and so then everyone votes on is the makeup of the group acceptable, and then you go on the mission, and then you vote on whether or not it succeeds or fails. And if everyone succeeds, then you're good to go. But if there's even one fail, then it fails. And then based on that, you kind of have to figure out, okay, who was the person who said fail? Because if you're Resistance, it always succeeds. But if you're a spy and you're in the Empire, you have the opportunity to fail the mission. And it's just a really cool concept. I really like this one a lot. It's one of those games that invites a lot of debates about like what's a good strategy for trying to suss out the Empire people. But honestly, I've seen the dynamics of certain groups lend themselves well to different approaches, and I think that's what makes it such a classic. It's also spawned a lot of imitators, and I've played a few of them, but to me, this is still one of the best. Speaking of which, though, this next game is arguably one of those. It's Bang the Dice game, and this is a kind of a Yahtzee version of a game called Bang. It's a game that was formerly a card game, and now it's a game where you roll dice, where you have 3 teams of people. You have instead of 2, you have the sheriff and their deputies. You have the outlaws, and then you have the renegades. And everybody has their secret identity card, and then you have their actual character card, and everyone has a special power, which makes things really, really cool. And I love the presentation of this game. Like, it really does look like a spaghetti western, down to the Italian translation for so much of the game. Like, almost everything, I think, has an Italian name on it, or a translation printed on it. So what you do on your turn is you roll these 5 dice here, and you'll notice I actually put these up here so that they show the faces. And you can get a Gatling gun if you get like 3 of these, I think, and then dynamite if you get 3 of them, it blows up in your face. Arrows are where the Native Americans come and attack you, and if you run out of arrows, and everyone gets hurt. And then beer allows you to heal up, and then this die, it has either a 1 or a 2, or that die face has either 1 or 2 in it, and allows you to shoot another player. So everyone is shooting each other, and it's just a lot of fun. It's chaotic. There's also an expansion to it, which I've packed inside, called Old Saloon, and it includes 2 more dice, which are pretty interesting. But it also has this really cool mechanic where if you get eliminated first, you get to still be a part of the game as a ghost, which is pretty funny. It's kind of like, if I could compare it to something, it's kind of like how in Mario Kart 64, you have the battle mode where if you get eliminated, you turn into like a bomb car, and you could like blow up other cars. It's kind of like that, where you just get to mess over everybody, and it's really, really cool. So that's Bang the Dice Game. All right, next up is a deck of playing cards. Now, this is a deck that my friend Rebecca gave to me, and it's got a lot of really cool illustrations of the national parks. This kind of reminds me a lot of the 59 Parks print series, but I think this is a separate series. This is not the same thing, but a lot of really beautiful cards. All right, so this game, Coup, is the kind of sequel of sorts to the Resistance. It also takes place in the dystopian universe, but unlike the Resistance, it has this kind of element of constant flexible roles where you're not strictly a part of an empire or a resistance. You have cards in this game, and once again, there's no actual art or like depiction of the components on the back, unfortunately, just some artwork. But you have cards with different roles on them. So here we have 2 of the characters that are in the game. This is the Duke, and I think that's the Ambassador, maybe? I forget. But each role has a certain ability, and so you can technically do anything on your turn, for the most part at least, providing you can pay for it in some cases. But if you do certain things, you're essentially admitting that you have that card, or at least you claim to have that card. And so people can try to call you out on your bluff if you're bluffing. They can try to assassinate you and do all kinds of things. You can try to block their stuff, and it's just a lot of fun. And there's even an expansion called Reformation, which introduces like a team element that I've packed away in here. It's kind of a weird name, but apparently like the original version of it was like Protestants versus Catholics or something like that, and I'm kind of glad they got rid of that since printing it. I think some of my friends might take issue with that, but it's a really fun game. Coup is just a blast. All right, now for a game I actually haven't played. This is one that I got when I first got into the hobby, and I'm gonna just stand it up there so I don't have to hold it in front of the camera. But Time's Up is one of the classic party games, and it's one of those games that for me is kind of the charade placeholder for my collection at the very least. But it's the same for a lot of other people too. And I got specifically the Title Recall edition of the game. So the reason for that is because the original Time's Up game had like names of people on it, and if you're doing a charades style game, you really don't want to have something where you have to make people guess other people's names, right? I mean, not everyone knows the names of celebrities, but if you have like the name of a movie, for example, you can break that up into multiple words and get people to guess the words. So that's one reason why I preferred getting this version. But the concept of this game is really interesting. You have like a select few cards that you go through, I think is how it works, and you have 3 rounds. And each round, you get the opportunity to go through the same things, but like you have progressively less and less stuff that you can do each round. So like the first round, you can say whatever you want, I think, and then the second round, it's like only 1 word. And then the third round, you basically have to mime everything without saying anything at all. So it's really, really cool how the whole thing works. And it comes with just a very simple presentation that's very easy to read. First round, say anything, then 1-word clue, and then act it out. And you only get 30 seconds, so it's one that I really want to try sometime. But for now, I'm definitely keeping that one. All right, so now on to a couple of newer games. First one up here is the Grimm Masquerade. I'm going to just stand it up there. So this game was put out by a company called Druid City Games, who has been kind of doing a lot of these fairy tale style games. They did a game called The Grim Forest, which I used to own, and then this is kind of like a game in that same universe. And then they recently did one that, on Kickstarter, that was about Alice in Wonderland, that I backed. And this one is a another kind of social deduction game. But unlike a lot of social deduction games, this one does not involve lying. Instead, it involves um, drawing and creating like tableaus of cards for yourself and for other people, and using what the cards are to determine who everybody is. So there's a central board that has all 8 of the fairy tale characters who are invited to this masquerade ball. And on your turn, you have to draw 2 cards, one at a time. The first one, you get to decide, am I going to keep this for myself, or am I going to put it in front of another player? And then the second one, you have to do the opposite of that. Um, so you get to draw these cards, and they have different things on them. And each character has a good item and a bad item. And so ultimately, you end the round, there's 3 rounds, by collecting 3 of the good item, but you get exposed, or unmasked, as the game calls it, by collecting 2 of the item that's bad. So, for example, Cinderella up here, she likes glass slippers, but she does not like clocks. You know, if you know the story of Cinderella, then you'd know why. And so, if you're Cinderella, you really want those glass slippers, and you want to avoid clocks. And then there's other things you can do. So you can discard 2 cards to point the finger at another player. Or do special actions each round. And if you're able to unmask a character, then you essentially get points, which are these roses. And if you are able to win the round effectively by collecting 3 of your, they call it boon item, and the bad item's your bane, I think, then you essentially get the rose trophy, which is worth a different amount each round. So it's a really cool game. And you can make it easier or more complicated depending on your group, which is a thing I really like. It's really neat. All right, and then lastly, I'm going to get to that thing in the back that's currently sitting there later on. I had to store it down here because there are other boxes on the shelf that its companion game currently occupies. So we'll talk about the game Museum much later on. But for now, I'm keeping that expansion box there. But the last game I'm going to talk about today is Wavelength. Now, this is the newest game on the list, and it's probably my favorite game out of all the ones that are here. And for me, this is the game that, in terms of mechanisms, replaces Codenames. And it has to have probably one of the most interesting presentations I have ever seen in a party game. Basically, you're split into teams, and you have this wheel. It looks like this. It has a little handle on it that you can use to cover up and not cover it up. And on your turn, the active player who's trying to get their team to guess something, they close up the wheel and they randomly spin it around, and then they open it up the wheel and they see this pie slice. And they're trying to get their team to dial this red dial into the middle of that pie slice if they can. And so what they have to do is they draw this card. So right here we have, actually let's go up here, cold to hot, right? So in this case, let's say they wanted to get the dial right there. They might say something like coffee. And so everyone now has to debate amongst themselves without the active player weighing in or giving anything away. They have to debate whether or not coffee falls on this side of the spectrum or that side of the spectrum, wherever it is. And so I love this example because it's such a subjective thing. You can be like, okay, coffee, right? That's hot, right? And then somebody could be like, but not as hot as the sun, or lava in this case. And then somebody might be like, well, is it iced, or is it, drip coffee or whatever? And then people are like, well, maybe coffee's not that great of a clue. So then they'll turn the dial, and then you get to open up the cover, and then you get to see where the dial lines up. And so if you'll get that many points, depending on where you turned it. So if you'll get points for being here, and no points for being out in the empty space. And there's different spectrums, and it's really interesting because you really get this, I don't know, just this sense of needing to empathize with other people. And I love that feeling. Like, I love the feeling of just trying to understand how other people think in the context of playing a fun game. Like, there are some things here that are definitely meant to be geared toward opinions, you know? And so the more you can think, okay, what would so and so think about, you know, is this person a bad or a good person? I mean, with the wrong group, that could be, you know, disastrous, but thankfully there's so many cards here that if you don't want to play with things that are maybe a little more controversial subject matter wise, you can set this to be however appropriate for your group that you want. So it's just a really, really fun game. That is Wavelength, and it is one that I highly recommend for just about anybody. All right, well, that is the first shelf cube. It's probably the longest of the videos, but next time we're going to be moving on to this one right here. So until then, thanks so much, everybody, for watching, and I will see you next time.